Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 658. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Charlotte and Dr. Norge. I'm joined with my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of the master of speculation, the Sultan of strategery, the bridge defying, is worried that a giant bridge will pop out of his belly, and of course he is the elder statesman of the podcast, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, we're going to be talking on this episode about Detective Comics number 1062 and Worlds Without a Justice League Green Lantern, issue number 1. We're sponsored as always by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
We have the Dark Crisis, the Deadly Green one-shot, 40% off only $3.59. And we have Dark Crisis, Worlds Without a Justice League Green Arrow, 40% off only $2.99. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, the first place I always look is the deals of the week. They have the Robin and Batman hardcover, $24.99 regularly, 50% off, only $12.49. They have the Swamp Thing trade paperback, Volume 2 Conduit, $16.99 regularly, 50% off, only $8.49. Wonder Woman Black and Gold hardcover, $39.99 regularly, 50% off, only $19.99. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. We have a contest going on now between now, I should say, and September 3rd. There's a chance for you to script Jim for spoiler warnings. Whether you want to send in your own spoiler warning that you can do via Skype or ragingbullets@gmail.com, our email address, or you want to send us what you want Jim to do. Any of those ways are ways to enter. Your prizes are, we're going to pick 3 winners. The first, second, and third prize are going to get the trade paperback or hardcover of their choice from DCB Service or InStockTrades.com. And they're going to get a guest spot on the show where they either join us, or if you're like, hey, that's not my cup of tea, you can script the segment. What book do you want us to talk about that is important to you that we're going to do on the podcast? So deadline is September 3rd, midnight September 3rd, in all time zones. We would love to have you be a part of that contest. But, Mr. Segulin, when it comes to spoiler warnings, nobody does it better. Let's go all James Bond on this.
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotlines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you ever read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
On that note, let's talk some comics.
Hello, Sean and Jim.
Our first discussion is on Worlds Without a Justice League Green Lantern. The script is by Philip Kennedy Johnson, art by Fernando Blanco, colors by Jordi Belair, letters Troy Petrie, covers by Fernando Blanca, variant covers by Mario Fox, Fucillo, Prasad, and Red Cressy. Associate editor is Chris Rosa, and editor is Paul Kaminsky. The Hawkgirl second story is script by Jeremy Adams, art by Jack Herbert, colors by Alex Guimaраes, letters by Troy Petrie, associate editor Chris Rosa, editor Paul Kaminsky, and of course, Superman was created by Cleveland's own Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family.
Did you get a different book than I did?
Why?
Because I got the Hawkgirl book with the Green Lantern story.
Oh.
This was great. I really enjoyed both stories in this. This is a great example of, again, how you do an event. And this goes back to, throughout our tenure, I mean, we've been doing this well over 17 years now, we've covered a lot of events. And I think one of the things that we've been very consistent about is when they do these one-shots, when they do these things that are side stories, we really prefer these ones that they enhance the story. It's not like we have to go read this and then go jump to this and then jump back to this. I like the way that they're doing everything tying into Dark Crisis. And this is just an example of more of what I like. And I also like that these one-shots have, while it's not, they're like direct stories with each of the characters that are involved, there's also a sense of progression in each one where we're getting a little more of an idea of what's going on with Pariah, a little more of an idea of what's going on with them. nuggets that are like being dropped on us. But yet I feel like we are visiting the world that they're trapped in. And you can see why they would want to stay there. And that's something that I think is pretty critical. You know, at this point, you want to start feeling like, okay, I get it. Or if you don't, that should also be a thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing I love about this issue particularly, because we saw in the main story what Pariah was doing.
Yeah.
So in this book, there is an explanation as to what Pariah is doing. They didn't have this in the first one because it hadn't been revealed yet. We kind of were guessing it and we were thinking that route, but we didn't have really confirmation until the last of the most recent Dark Crisis actual main story. So they didn't throw anything off with that, and I like that. I really appreciated, the fact that they went that little bit of extra bit where they didn't put that in the side stories. They waited until time-wise and everything was came out. And again, another really cool story where we're seeing the different heroes their true dream. And I love the usage of different characters in this. Like, when I saw Jason, I was like, and on that first page, I'm like, is that Jason? Like, oh my God, that's Natasha. Oh, that is awesome. And I love the fact that they've got their variations of these heroes in this world, because now everybody is, got the green. That's the main basis of the heroes, is the green. So you're going to still see these characters have that base of who they were, but lanternized.
Yeah. And that's a great way to put it. Well, it goes to the idea that John is this architect and a soldier who is building a world. He is building a world that ultimately doesn't need him. And I say that cautiously for exactly the reason that you would think I would, but yet does. He hasn't lost his importance. He hasn't lost his role as being the guardian. The soldier's drawn back to defending that which, he's helped build and what's important to him. And in some ways defending his family. There's a lot of lore here, and there's a lot of choices that are made here that are very John-centric that I really like. You've talked before about how you're a John Stewart guy. I love the Green Lantern Corps as a concept like you do as well. If I had to pick my lantern, it's Hal, but I love John. I love Kyle. I love Guy. Throughout my life, they've been there. Hal was, when I was a little kid, Hal was my first Green Lantern, and I always just have this affinity towards Hal. But I gotta say, they're really doing a great job at grabbing what I think worked really well in the Justice League animation with John, if I'm making any sense. I felt like that's where he started to shine and become like mainstream. I feel like John Stewart from the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, and this has come up many times in a lot of different venues, I'm not coining this, he is a lot of people's Green Lantern because of that media, and in some ways is more well known than Hal now because of that. And it's interesting, but this one shot with him was fantastic. And I'm with you with geeking out at seeing people who are lanterns in this that aren't normally lanterns.
Oh, big time. And one of the things, again, this really does show this, this one shot really shows why I really like John, why he is my lantern. Mm-hmm. Because he is a Marine, so he is that warrior, but he is also that architect. He has that intelligence. He has just that way of looking at life a little bit differently, because he is a creator. He's not just a destroyer. And I love the fact that I've always loved how he has that balance in him between the warrior and the architect. And this really does show that in who he is and how he fights and just the world he's crafted. The fact that, you think about it, as the Guardian, he brought peace to the universe and then retired. And he gave back his mother, their deceased daughter, his sister, her daughter, and gave her back, that gift. And it's not just about death. It's not about destruction. It's not about, look at me, I'm the great one. No, he stepped aside and let his team do it. But when they needed to call for backup, who do you call in? You call in the Guardian. And he I obviously is going to answer the call and, lay down, just lay the smack down. I was just, this throughout this thing, I was like, this was an absolutely brilliant story about who John is, what he's about. And I love just the moments where you go from the high action combat to the man, then back to, okay, I'm needed. It's time to show why I am the Guardian. And again, it completely shows why John would want to stay in this world. This right here doesn't have any of the failings that he's had. It has just this great peace involved, and he's actually able to sit on the farm, and hang out with his mom, hang out with his little sister. It's absolutely wonderful. I love this story and love why. Again, another great story showing why the heroes are choosing to stay in this fantasy world.
Is that his sister? And I mean, this isn't an argumentative. It's interesting because he presents it that way. Mom presents it that way, but the way that they talk about it is her based on his memory of
right.
her. So I love this kind of stuff because it gets really heady where you sit there and say, is this a sentient being that you could grow to love? I think that's an easy yes. Is it his sister? Truly his sister? No. Yeah, we're on the same page there. Yeah, but isn't that fun to talk about? Because I think it's a cool concept because you start having to really address what I think is an interesting concept, and I like that they went there with this.
Oh, definitely. And when I say it's sister, I don't really believe it's the sister, but like you, there's something. She's the battery. She's the battery of Oa,
right?
And as he said in the thing, this is baby sister, or at least his memory of her. So that's why she doesn't age. That's why she stays that little girl who's still, working on her reading and all that. And these are just those fond memories of him. Now, here's the thing. We both have loved ones that we would love to bring back.
Yep.
But in time, you would realize that's not the person. And I think in time, that would get to me.
That's where this world starts to be. These worlds.
I think that's where the breakdown is going to be of these worlds.
Right. Where you're combating with the part of yourself that it's like comfort food, right?
Yeah.
I think about today's my stepdad's birthday, and I think about my mom. I think about my dad in general, and I'm sitting there saying, what would I do to be able to have another conversation with my dad, another conversation with my mom? But then you look at something like this and would I do this? And I could see the initial attraction, being able to talk to them, but then when would I start to realize it's not really them? And when would I want to give that up? We both had friends that we don't talk to anymore or, have fallen out of touch with, or people that we grew up with that we don't see. And you can see how this world would get attracted because you start bringing those people back into the fold, right? People maybe who you wish you had connected with or wish you'd spent time with, or maybe even somebody you wronged where you're like, well, there's a chance to right that now, right?
Mm-hmm.
These worlds start to get really heady with that. I love that John's world is pretty encompassing in the number of people that are affected by this. And saved by his world, where like he's, I like the amount of architecture that's in the city proper, but yet when he chooses his homestead, it's very grounded and very humble and a farm, almost like Superman's.
Yeah.
It's an interesting sort of peaceful calm almost away from everything that makes him him. And we all need that escape, right? Where it's got to get away from everything that I've done that keeps me moving and working, and so I can just get to the core basics of enjoying my family and being close to them. I loved that concept of this.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's one of the neat things, again, as I said about John, is he's got that, that nature where he's done. He's retired. He's going to retire at the farm. He's going to think. And in reality, that is the last thing you would think about, the architect. And, if we remember back to when we talked in Dark Crisis, when Hal went into his world and he landed on Oa. or their version of OA, which is now Sector, I can't remember what they called it, but it was the main thing. It was all that fancy looking, completely high end, really cool looking, graphic design and, just that neatness of that, you would expect that an architect would design. And then he goes back to this just simple farm with just the three of them, nobody else around him. And it was one of those cool things where yeah. I could see him wanting that peace and quiet.
Yeah.
And especially what he went through in this world to wrap everything up, to get it so everything is, so he has this giant world peace. And the one scene I love is when he's transforming back to being the Guardian. When he first starts flying, and they show it, as the green first envelops him. Then the symbol appears on his chest. Then the spear forms, and he's got the big cape flowing. And I'm like, that is a really cool look. I would love for him to keep that look when this is all said and done, because that is a neat look for John. I absolutely love that.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see what our heroes are going to be. Well, we've seen some of this, so I don't want to say too much. There's been preview images of later issues of Dark Crisis that reveal a lot, and I'm not going to say too much about those. The covers, I should say. Yeah. The covers, and I feel like some of those are like kind of a giveaway-ish, but they don't ruin the story. They kind of start to verify things and what have you. That doesn't mean what their future is going to be and what they decide to do moving forward. I love this look. I think you're right. It's very, very cool. There's that one shot that's coming, and I can't wait to read that with more John. Did you like the Jeffrey Thorne series?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I did too. It's been an interesting time for Green Lanterns because you're not hearing a lot of buzz around them. I don't know what's needed for comics in general to get the kind of buzz that I think we were used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I would love to see more excitement around books like that, because I think that was a run that did an interesting little concept. I'm thinking back to things like Legion Lost and stuff like that, where they told this really cool story of the not the Guardians, but the Green Lantern Corps going on this quest. I liked that. I liked the approach. Like any series like that, you expect that to be finite, where there's going to be an ending to that story arc, and they're going to come back to the world as we know it, as we're used to. But I really enjoyed that book and that approach to the story.
Yeah, with me, the first Green Lantern book series I ever actually collected was Mosaic.
Yeah.
Which was John's series.
I was
at BG, and my one buddy Hoach said, "Hey, I think you'd like this." So he let me borrow it, because back then I borrowed books, and sure enough, I was like, "Man, this thing is outstanding." And that was like my first introduction, because I knew who the Green Lanterns were, but that was really my first true series I ever collected and ever actually read, solid on the Green Lantern. So again, it's, part of my love for John was he literally was my first Green Lantern, other than, what I knew about Hal. And I kind of, would read a little bit about, Kyle and all that when Hal lost it and the whole parallax. I kind of knew what was going on, but I didn't really read any of that stuff. It was Mosaic was the first Green Lantern book that I actually sat down and read.
So that was was that your first media exposure to Green Lantern?
No. I knew who the Green Lantern was. I knew about the rings and the willpower, the yellow weakness and that kind of stuff that was around. And what else would that was Mosaic happened after Parallax, right?
No,
it happened before. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm having problems with timeline back then because it was college, but I knew about the Green Lanterns. I knew who they were. Didn't completely have I couldn't I couldn't pick him out of the lineup or anything like that. And I knew who Guy Gardner was because of reading the whole Death of Superman story, and talked a little bit to, again, my friend in college, who was a heavy DC reader. I'm like, hey, who is this guy? He seems like a jerk. He's like, oh, he is. That's Guy, So I borrowed some stuff read about a little bit about Guy throughout the Death of the Superman story. So I kind of got to see some of the Guy's stuff. So I knew who they were, but I never shelled out money until Mosaic. That was the first time I actually ever, put money down and said, I'm going to buy that. Put the issues aside for me. I want to own these comics.
So Mosaic happened in 90, and Parallax happened in 94?
Okay. Yeah.
So it was, they're close. So I see that.
Because I didn't read it was funny, I didn't actually read the Parallax story. I talked about it. And I maybe borrowed an issue or something like that, but I never actually read it until after, we started doing the show.
That story drew me back into Green Lantern comics. So I started hearing this rumbling of, I read Death of Superman, and then there was a story, I knew there was a storyline coming that was going to be Hal's reaction to what happened with Coast City. I always loved Green Lantern. It was, again, I read Green Lantern monthly at various times in my life. But it got bumped not because of quality, it got bumped because of lack of budget. So I have multiple periods in my life way before that where I can say I read Green Lantern for multiple months and really enjoyed reading arcs of the story. Gerard Jones was one of the writers who I remember reading and really enjoying the stuff that he was doing, where the Guy Gardner's taking over as Green Lantern. I read a lot of that stuff because there was a storyline with Guy, there was a storyline with Hal still going on during all of that I really enjoyed following. So all of that stuff was really cool. The Parallax storyline, so when that rolled around, like everybody else, I read and enjoyed Death of Superman. Really wanted to find out where things went with Hal. And I heard about that what was coming up was going to be a replacement of Hal. I read the initial run of Kyle Rayner. And I only jumped off, not because of quality, again, because of budget. I read, multiple months of Kyle Rayner. And then it was just, at the time I was in college and money made the decision for me that I couldn't keep following. I was jumping between a lot of comics during that time, though, where I was getting into this run and then like, I kind of want to read this, and I read that run. So I was doing a lot of I had like certain favorites that I was following, like The Flash and Starman, for example, during that time that were like non-negotiables. And then I had like 2 books that 2 book slots, I should say, that I was rotating out with indies and other DC stuff and other Marvel stuff, where I'd read things for arcs or for a few months and was just kind of experimenting and exploring with comics. And it was fun. I kept wanting to read more, but your budget would only allow so much. That's where comic shops were fun. You'd go in and hear people talking about something, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll read that.
Yeah.
I remember picking up a book called, I don't know if it was during this time frame, so please excuse me on this. I remember reading a book for a while called Poison Elves that I really enjoyed. It's by a writer-artist called Drew Hayes, and I really enjoyed that book for a while. But it was, a lot of that. Moon Shadow from DC, that was, it was, I think it was DC initially. Maybe it wasn't DC initially. But it was J.M. DeMatteis and John J. Muth. And I picked up that in a hardcover collection. And it was the comic shop owner who had basically said, this is a gorgeous book. And here's how I picked that one up. I shouldn't say, I kept looking at the hardcover. I didn't, at the time, it was out of my budget. My mom knew I loved comics and got me that for my birthday. And it was just kind of a cool thing. It was signed and numbered.
Oh, cool.
The Bright Revenant. What a interesting little villain. And I liked that it felt like something fresh in the sense that all of these concepts that are here, even concepts that we've seen before, are ones that have been touched up based on what is right for Jon Stewart's new world. And that part I really liked. There was this sense of an epic battle, this sense of a being that Jon had to go against. And also, think about Jon's history where there was a planet that was destroyed and Jon has been dealing with the guilt of responsibility for that. In this case, our planet is one where Jon has rescued it and reinvigorated it and been the leader and the lead force in building it and into something better, something more. It's everything that's the opposite of the worst of Jon's life, right?
Exactly.
I love that.
Now, the thing I was wondering, when I was looking at the Bright Reverend and all that stuff, we've got this giant evil baby with bat wings who has an army of Hawkmen. So who are you rooting for in this fight? I'm just curious.
The army of Hawkmen
or Jon?
The army of Hawkmen.
Oh,
And it's really, I'm home team on that one. I love Jon, but I think the Hawkmen should win.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I'd be sad because, you're losing an enemy that, like, you have fondness for. But in the end, I'm rooting for the army of Hawkmen.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem, though. And it's really something where I got to talk to the Hawkmen. Why are they following this giant baby?
Well,
Because I have zero allegiance to the giant baby. It's the Hawkmen only. So to the point of what you're asking, it's which team am I on? I'm on the team of the Hawkmen, but if I find they're being manipulated by giant baby, I might be switching teams where I want them to rescue the Hawkmen. If you follow me.
Yeah, no, I get you. Now, the thing I'm wondering is, does Jon have some bias against Hawkman? Is that where this is coming from? Because, this world is basically Jon's creation, and it's pulled from stuff in Jon's mind. Does Jon have any issues with either Thanagar or with Hawkman that they're maybe playing on? Because, like, you think back to with the Superman one where he kind of had that, where Jon in his fantasy world kind of had that Robin-esque look to him because he was always like envious of Bruce and his relationship with his Robins growing up. Are we seeing something that maybe Jon has some issues with Hawkman?
Oh, you mean like deep-rooted resentment of Hawkman? It may be something where it's like, listen, when you're as cool as Hawkman, and you know that like it's unattainable, that you'll never be that cool, I can see the resentment, right? It's jealousy. It's a little bit of jealousy. I think that's a thing. Whereas he feels more having his own Robins is more attainable, but being as cool as Hawkman is just not. I get it. I joking aside, I don't know where the idea that the Hawkmen were the bad guys of this came from, but I was digging it just because I love the visuals of these like evil Hawkmen.
Yeah.
And I, like you, liked the idea of Jon having, like, his core was made up of some very unique individuals that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting the traditional core members. And this is an idea of Jon not just being a savior of the core, but being a architect and a builder of a better Earth.
Yeah. He is the hero of this universe.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a neat way to go with it. And the thing I was wondering, because I know in the TV series that Hawkgirl and Jon had a thing going on. And I'm trying to remember in the comic book universe if they ever had something.
They explored it for a minute.
Yeah.
But not to the level that the TV series did. And I guess here's the thing. I'm kind of glad that they explored it for a minute and let it go. And let me explain why. I think the TV series did it so well and had its own continuity. I don't think you needed to do it in comics because you're kind of forcing something in that doesn't have, like, depth. The TV series did it so well because it had depth to it, right? It's why we reference that and like it, because that developed organically. I'm kind of glad to let the Dini Timverse be its own thing, because wow, was that outstanding. Yeah, they did explore it for a minute, but nothing Obviously, you would know if they explored it more.
Yeah, because that was the thing. I was trying to remember it. I didn't. So,
Yeah.
Hot Girl Story. I absolutely love this one as well.
Again, great example of switching up creative teams. Can I? You threw out the script already, the creative teams, but I will say I think a good choice of all of these books has been we've had more than one hero. We've chosen creative teams that have been unique, and this has a very different art style and a very different feel. And I was ready for that. Like the John Stewart story ended, and I wanted something that felt different. It felt like I was reading a whole new comic. And that was exactly what I needed from this. Imagine, you and I are both big fans of Highlander.
Yeah.
And I think you know where I'm going to go with, and I love Doctor Who and stuff like that. But what this really tackles is immortality is not all it's like cracked up to be.
No, it's not.
And I loved that part of this.
And I'll be honest with you, that's something I never really thought of with the Hawks. You know, because like with some of my favorite vampire stories have done that kind of stuff with, you know, and as you said with Highlander, they reach a point when the immortals they're done with it. They don't want to be immortal anymore.
Yeah.
I never thought about that like with the Hawks. How they die, their bodies come back, they're dealing with all over a new body and just dealing with a new circumstance, but they're still the same person. And I was like, yeah, that would kind of stink, you know. And it's
but also she references it like, and I'm building off of what you're saying, not contradicting. She references like it's a hamster wheel, where it's like it's like the same thing over and over again, and like it's almost predetermined. And you know, this idea of I'm not living a new life, I'm living the same life. And you just know that if you're going to die, you're going to come back again and do it all again. Do it all again. It's not I'm living something new. I'm being something new. It's eventually I'm going to remember who I am and discover who I am and then live that life again. And then I'm going to die and then I'm going to come back and then yada yada yada. It really, she makes it seem like it's which I don't know if Carter and Shira feel the same way as Kendra did. And I really liked that this one. I loved when they introduced Kendra into JSA. I love that series from Jeff Johns, and the idea that Kendra was Shira but was something different. This further expands the idea of Kendra being a very unique entity, and I really like Kendra. And I'm glad, and that doesn't take anything away from my adoration of Carter and Shira, but they're the great love, right? That keeps coming back together. Kendra now has been more separated into being her own thing. And I think this story really benefits from that, doesn't it?
Oh, big time. Big time. And I was thinking, like, you know, my knowledge and experience with the Hawks is dramatically less than yours, of course. But, you know, that was the thing I think with this, it really does show that separation you're talking about. It really does show that Kendra is different than the others. You know, and it's one of those things that I was like, if this had been Shira, I probably wouldn't have liked her hatred for the immortality as much as because it's Kendra. And I think that was something that really does play out well.
Right. Yeah, it really, really does. This is... I love the idea of exploration as an archaeologist, what she's going for here. She's on this quest, though, and at first you're like wondering what the quest is, then you're like, oh, she's trying to find a way to end the cycle.
Yep.
And to actually have a life she can own, a life that with a sense of purpose and a sense of finality, and a thing where you're like, I want to fight to live, right? Living matters. I care about living. I really like that. I do. I will say one thing I'm geeking out to, which seems like a weird thing. While I like this white outfit that they do with her in this, I do love the distinction of Kendra's outfit, the regular Hawk outfit versus Shira's. I always liked the difference. I liked that when Shira came back, or when they further fleshed out Shira, that Shira went more to a traditional like connection to the Hawkman outfit, and it's more the same. If you follow what I'm saying, like Kendra's headdress is different. Kendra's whole outfit is different, and I like that. I think Kendra's a unique character. And man, am I glad that they kept her moving on even when they brought Shira back.
I'll tell you, I really like this white outfit better.
You like it better?
I like it better. I like this outfit better. And everything you're saying, I'm not going to, I understand why you like the
I don't, but I'm not. It's not in the sense that I'm fighting with you. I'm actually more fascinated to hear more of what it is you're digging and that type of thing, because I think that's personal preference. And let me be clear, I don't dislike the white outfit. It may be the history piece that you're talking about. I love Kendra so much that I'm more protective of her traditional outfit. But what is it about the white outfit you dig so much? Okay,
one, it is so dramatically different than Hawkman. I kind of like that. Yeah. She's got her own strengths. She has her own look. I'm not, Hawkman's girl. I am my own hero. And I really like that. Plus, this one has, to me, a more Egyptian kind of ancient feel to it. With the white and the big gold neck piece. And it looks to me like this is more of an ancient Egypt, ceremonial garb that has been augmented for combat, augmented for the wings. And that's why I kind of really like this, even though she's not the traditional, ancient Egyptian reborn, but I kind of like the fact that she's got that look. And again, it was when I looked at that scene, where it shows her standing in the center and all her different lives and all that stuff. And I look at that costume and I look at the others. I'm like, I really do like this better, man. This for me would be another, I wish they keep this outfit going forward.
Let me put it this way. I say I don't, and there's a truth to that. I like the other outfit better. But if you were to ask me, would you buy a Hawkgirl series where she was wearing that outfit? 110% in an instant. Yeah. So it's not, I don't hate the outfit. I like the outfit. If you were asking personal preference, I like her Hawkgirl outfit. But I really do think it's a history piece, and I like the distinctions of it for all the reasons that I said before. I loved seeing her in general, like when she eventually achieves her goal of being able to live her life. She's almost ready to die, and she's like, is this how it ends? And why do I feel so alive? And then she starts like ratcheting up the battle. And I thought it was so great to see like her pleasure in the battle and Pariah just laughing at the whole thing, knowing that he was winning. Winning because of the fact that she was embracing this world that he'd crafted to trap her. What a great ending of this issue. What a great ending.
Oh, big time. Again, I love the sequence and everything you said, that look, on her face, when she's like, why do I feel so alive? I love that look. Again, this for me was another great art, and, the script and art working together to really give us some cool stuff. And just the physical combat and the battle and the moment where she goes basically beast mode and she just starts trashing these dudes, these crushing skulls literally, and I absolutely love it. And again, another great scene where they show her that kind of look as she's smashing. I was like, this is outstanding. Once again, absolutely love this character, love this. And then it goes to Pariah just laughing. I'm like, oh man, this again, I understand completely why she wants to stay here. This is the dream of her heart. And I'm like, yes, okay, there's another one where locked in solid. Good job, Pariah.
To the Batmobile. Let's go. Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed. You're ready to move up.
Our next discussion is going to be of Detective Comics 1062. The writer is Ram V. Raphael Albuquerque on the art. Dave Stewart on colors. Ariana Maher on letters. Evan Eagle on the cover. We've got Leah Bermeo on the variant cover. J.H. Williams III on the variant cover. It's INHYUK Lee on the variant cover. I didn't want to butcher the name. And there was another variant cover by J.H. Williams III. Ariana Totoro as a senior associate editor. Jessica Chen is the editor. Ben Abernathy is the group editor. Batman created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. And apologies for any name butchery. You know, it's funny, I'm raving how much I'm loving the new Batman creative team. I equally want to say that about this creative team. And Peter Rios and I were exchanging like a couple little tweets about this one. And I think one of the things that is striking me about this, boy, think about how much talent has hit Batman and Detective Comics. It's so hard to take a book, and we'll talk about the Jim Gordon backup story when we get to it, but how hard is it to take books like this and make it feel fresh, where you feel like, wow, they're telling a new kind of story, but also telling it with a new kind of atmosphere? And that is happening with this. I love the idea. You and I are big fans of progression. This book has it in droves, because this really explores the idea of Batman getting older, the idea of a new kind of villain, and a really supernatural concept. Kind of like the Batman movie, right? I think Batman right now as a comic versus Detective Comics, they have a unique atmosphere and feel and flavor that is different from each other, the same way that the films, you know, the various film series seem to be different than each other. And I really welcome that. What a gorgeous book this is. I really, really enjoyed this read from a visual standpoint, from a story. Ram V, it just seems like Ram V is writing it. I am in. Yeah. I love that Ram V is involved in the Batman universe. And Detective Comics seems to be the absolute right fit, because this has become like the experimental Batman book, right? And
actually,
it's working really well.
Oh, big time. Big time. And again, it's funny because with Ram V, I've started doing searches on him and seeing what other books he's worked on. And I'm like, and what else has he done that I've read that I didn't realize?
Or missed.
Was him. Or missed, yeah. Or missed. And so he's one of those guys that I'm starting to look out for. I'm looking up and I'm getting other stuff that's not DC related.
Yep.
But if it's got his name on it, I'm giving it a try. I'm like, I'll give an issue a read or 2 issues a read to see if it's my groove, you know. And he's got that style that I really dig, and he fits Detective Comics. He fits this, so it's kind of a neat thing to see when you've got a writer that, you know, because not everybody I think can write detective. Not everybody can write, you know, Batman. You know, he is a character that, you know, depending on what book you're working on, you've got to have that right groove and that right style to it. You know, and even like some of the great ones out there, I'm like, I don't know. I'd be curious to see how they do it. How would they write a detective story? You know, would their style fit detective? You know, I think that would be kind of an interesting thing for me. But, you know, his groove does fit, and I'm liking this, man.
This idea of this performance that opens the whole thing up, but it's more than a performance. It's almost like this supernatural happening.
Yeah. Was
like really cool. And the idea that Bruce wasn't there, but yet there was this sense that the demon was missing, and that Bruce, you know, not the necessarily that the artist performing knew that Bruce was the demon, but boy, that connection to where is this entity was really, really cool. I loved seeing the artistry behind Batman when we get to see Batman actually operating in the series. Seeing him during the first mission, like the combat sequences, I think was really great. They know I'm coming. Fear leads to mistakes, and I don't make many. And you see him sitting there where with age comes experience. With experience comes, you know, an increased sense of efficiency, but yet he's also starting to slow down when we get into like the Maroni, or what looked like Bruno Maroni, Sal's nephew, and morphs into that creature. And Bruce knows, I'm getting beat up here, and I'm getting beat up bad. He knows that he's got to either somehow gain an advantage, gain a little edge. And I like that Talia shows up on the scene, and we get to see, it almost feels like a progression from the relationship with her and Bruce in the recent arc involving Robin. Right? Where that hasn't been dropped. We now have a relationship between the two where they're sort of getting along, but sort of not, because their philosophies are drastically different. These are two people that clearly have a love for each other, but there's also remorse or resentment, or I don't know what you'd call it. There's something there that shows that it didn't end well.
Yeah.
And I love the use of Talia in this.
Oh, big time. Big time. And I loved the inner dialogue that Bruce is going through this. I'm not always a big fan of that, but, with this one, it really did fit. Because especially from the beginning, as you said, where he's like talking about, the laser alarm strung up, meant to warn them, makes my job easier. They know I'm coming, and then just the timing, how he's like 18 seconds, 22. And then even in the fight with him, he's like, come on, Bruce, you fought harder than this. You fought worse. And I love that, just that inner dialogue he's playing. And then you get to that point when he's like, something wrong. Heart's exploding out of my chest. And it looks like Bruce is going to be down, and that's when Talia comes in for the save. I love the fact that, we had those moments where you really do see something's wrong here with Bruce. This guy... Yes, he's big, he's fast, he's supernatural, but Bruce has taken this before. Bruce has gone one-on-one with Grundy and Croc, who are, epic level of powers and strength, and he's dealt with them. Something's off here. And I love the notion that something is just not clicking on all cylinders with Bruce. There's something wrong. It's not just because of being age, there's something else. And I love that concept and that idea going on, that there's something off-kilter here.
So you really think it's something beyond age?
I think so.
Okay.
And I think they played it well, where because when he's talking to Grayson, he's running all the tests and everything comes back normal. And Grayson even says, "Hey, old man, you're getting older." And part of me's like, could it be that, or just is there something else going on? I don't know. And I love the fact that I don't completely know, because it could very easily be age thing, but it may not be. I don't know. I love just that little mystery going on, and especially love the fact that Bruce was initially mad at Talia, saying, "Hey, you know the rules. When you're in my town, you play by them." And Talia's like, "Hey, no killing humans. That's not human." And that for me was a really neat moment.
Yeah.
And again, it adds to that thing going on between Bruce and Talia, and just where do they stand? What it's the ex, it's the baby mama. And there's more than just that between them. Could they could potentially be something more, but they can't, based on their nature of who they are. And I love that kind of tragic romance that these two will never truly be together.
How real is that? Because how many times is it so much has happened, so much water's under the bridge, that at what point in time can you love each other still and have those like foundational feelings? So much has happened that you can't find there's no pathway to find your way back, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very real situation. I love the sense that there will always be something there, but yet they can't. And we just know it won't work.
Right.
And I love that. I love that that's a thing. How cool was Dick Grayson's portrayal in this, and how that it matches what's going on in the Tom Taylor book, but that Dick is like one of those characters that they're like, I like the sense of progression in their relationship too, where that they've had tough times, they've had good times, they've had bad times, they've had times where they clearly haven't talked, but now they're at a point where they respect and appreciate each other, their colleagues, their family. I love that the writers are embracing this, and you get moments like this that feel fresh. This felt like a fresh interaction between the two of them, and that was something that I really enjoyed about this. And that's hard to do with their history.
Yes. And again, a great usage of both characters. Great. I really do love the Bat family. I love when Bruce is embracing the family.
Yep.
And again, Grayson, he is the Robin, or the ex-Robin, or he is the hero that can call Bruce out on stuff like this. And I love the fact that he does it. It's like, what were you worried you got exposed? Like, no. What's going on here? Oh, just routine checks. you're in the basement at 3 a.m. hooked up to a bunch of sensors. None of that is routine. And I love the fact that, Dick calls him out on that, saying, hey, something's not right here. And that, again, it shows the connection these two have. Again, he isn't he's not a sidekick. He is a partner. He is an equal in the fight. And I love seeing that.
They're buddies, they are friends, they are family, there's the father-son relationship. But you and I both have this with our family, right? And it looks a little different because different, family members and different, but we both have this with our own fathers. I was fortunate before my father passed that we became friends. And we weren't always friends. There was a father-son relationship there, but there's a point in time, and it may have looked very different for you and me, but I've had the good fortune of going out with you and your father, right? And I dig your father a lot. And I dig, actually, I can extend that to both of your parents. I've digged both of your parents over the years. They've always been very, very kind to me. But I think in recent years, I would make the argument that I've gotten to know your dad more in recent years than, because I knew your mom. I think your mom and I knew each other a lot longer. Maybe a strange thing to say, but I think there's some truth to that. And I love your relationship with your dad. My dad and I had this. My brother was really into sports and do a lot more of the things that my father was into. So they always had like this really strong buddy relationship. My dad and I didn't have that. My dad didn't get me. And that's not an indictment of my father. I don't think I got him either. As we got later in life, we did. Something clicked. And I think that's a blessing when you hit to that point. I connect a lot to the relationship of Bruce and Dick Grayson because think about the years in comics where they didn't get along and they didn't connect and they didn't click. I feel I count myself lucky that I can look at this relationship between the two of them now and go, my dad and I had that at the end. We got to say all the things that we wanted to say to each other, and we had that kind of relationship. I love that, like, when I read this relationship between the two of them, there's a personal connection to it. That is cool. That's a sign of great writing that makes these characters feel human. And it's hard to do when you're doing these type of stories, but what keeps us coming back month after month, it's this. It's that feeling of these are our friends, we root for them, there's progression to them. This is a circumstance can make these relationships very, very hard. Bruce makes relationships very, very hard, as we see with Talia, and we know over the years with both Dick and Barbara, in that particular relationship. But since we've started through comics, I think one of the areas where sometimes we've disagreed is what we want progression to look like. And I think we're both jonesing over the progression that we're seeing in this, right? Because it feels like forward movement of the needle, doesn't it?
Yes, 100% feels like forward movement, and I'm very happy with this, with how it's changing. And it's one of those things where you look at Bruce and you think how intelligent he is and just the level of strategy it takes to be Batman.
Yeah.
That level of intelligence, that planning, he plans for everything, but he can't learn from his own past mistakes, and he keeps making those over and over again. And that was the thing that always, that was the thing that kind of annoyed me. And they kind of explained some of his paranoia because of the mind thing they did in the, that mind zap they did to him in Identity Crisis and all that stuff that was revealed there. So I'm like, okay, you can kind of see the paranoias coming from and all that, but he still should have gone beyond it. We're seeing the Bruce who's learned from his past mistakes, and he's not making them again.
Yeah.
Again, that for someone of his intelligence, his training, his experience, he shouldn't be making the same mistakes over and over and over again. It's one of those things that always, with Luther, he's got that classic flaw where you're like, dang it, Luther, if you just applied yourself towards good and not evil stuff, you actually would be the savior of the world.
What
but you've got to have and Luther has his cloudedness that blocks him. And that's one of the things I love about the character, because he has that. But I'm glad that Bruce doesn't have those same barriers. It separates the difference why Luther's a villain and Bruce is a hero.
Bruce learning how to embrace the Bat family more. And I love that it's not just a light switch, where it's like now all of a sudden everybody just gets along.
Yeah.
Each of those relationships is different. Some of them are tentative. His own son, Jason Todd, there's relationships there, but they're very different than the relationship we're seeing here with Dick Grayson, Duke. All of those relationships are ones that are continuing to evolve and grow. I love that. And we're seeing a Bruce who is, I think, so much, now I don't want to say more interesting, continues to be interesting because of the fact that this is a character that's malleable. That there's a foundational core of what makes Batman cool that is here, but yet how do we make Batman of a new era? Batman of a right now? A Batman that feels unique for people that have been reading him since 70s, 60s, maybe before. So that way they want to keep tuning into this character and yet finding something that feels familiar, yet contemporary. This feels very, very contemporary, very, very now, but hasn't thrown out everything we loved. I, as a little kid in the 70s when I was watching and reading Batman, I feel that this is the same guy today, but yet he's evolved like I have.
Yeah.
And
100% agree.
I really, really enjoy seeing my friend grow and wanting to see more about where is that going to go. This is where, when I get defensive about replacement of the character, like I love Jace. And let me be clear, Jace is not a replacement of Bruce. And I think what they've done with Jace is brilliant because what they've opened a doorway to is give Jace his own city, let him explore being his kind of Batman over there. I want to read this too, because I want to see what Bruce is doing now and how Bruce is growing in today's world and how he is different than he was 17 years ago when you and I started first talking about him. This is not the same character, but yet we can see how he was that guy 17 years ago. And I love that part where there's a progression to this that is really, really outstanding. Kudos to Ram V for nailing that home run, because this feels like the guy we were reading back then, and yet Ram V's given him his own flavor. This feels fresh.
Oh, big time, big time. And again, this isn't like a dramatic, oh my God, this is completely different bad. No,
right.
They took this nice progression, as you said. That's one of the things I love about seeing that. Again, this is the hero. I want to root for him. And I 100% have been rooting for him in this journey of self-discovery and change, and he stumbles, he has some times where he falls back into his old ways, but he picks himself up and he moves forward. This was a great sign of what's to come for Bruce. Now it looks like he's going to, again, of all the superheroes, for me, Bruce Wayne has the hardest road of all the heroes. And I think that's one of the things that, really does. I feel bad for the guy because he goes from one epic event to another epic event, another. Gotham City is just this magnet for pain and suffering. And I feel bad for the guy because of it. But he does make some really interesting stories. So I want to know who this new villains that are coming in, that are moving in, are going to, be the air quotes savior of Gotham. I'm like, oh God, we got another group like that moving in. What is this going to be? I love, again, great introductions of a brand new villain group that I already know is going to be something epic.
Wait, and with rich history with Arkham. This is the Arkham family. And I love that they're now, let's take the Arkham family and let's blow your mind by exploring the history of that. This was a really smart move because it's taking something that's a really cool concept in the Arkham family that we've seen played with and saying, well, you thought you knew everything about the Arkham family? Let's go back a bit.
Yep.
But then let's bring them to present. And this is a family that wants to reclaim the throne. You had me already with everything you were doing before with Bruce. Now we're going to screw around with that? Very cool. This was a neat choice. The artwork here is something we've talked about over the years, Raphael Albuquerque, multiple times on the podcast. There's an artist named Kyle Holtz, who I really like, that Raphael Albuquerque, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering any names here, I think is tapping into what I like about that artist as well, who I first learned about from the Ultraverse from Nightman. I really love seeing this kind of presentation where it feels very supernatural in his presentation while having a little bit of grounded in reality. This is a good look for, like, it had me intrigued. It feels different than what we were seeing with Bruce and Nightwing. This is the same artist. This is the same art team. Yet in this book, they've shifted the tone because of the fact that now we are talking about the Arkham family, and we're kind of blowing your mind with, you thought you knew what was going on with them? Well, this family tree's a lot bigger than you thought that it was. I like that. I like the sense of legacy there because we've seen so much going on in Detective Comics with Arkham, with the Arkham Tower and things like that, and how it's gone horribly wrong. They're like, we need to take control of that legacy again and really rebrand it, rename it, and remind people of who and what we are. That was a cool concept in this.
Oh, big time, big time. And I liked how, again, with the Mr. Guile, preparing, the way, that's, he's already on there. And this was something that, it was funny, that great scene, when he's in the bar. Something I missed, but I caught it in my art read-through. The very first panel there, you see the goons standing outside the bar, and then you see the cloaked figures walking up to them. And then later on, you see the cloaked figures that gutted and cleaning the blood off of the blades.
I
missed that. My first read through, because again, I'm focused on the words, I'm focused on jumping right into the action, the weird eyes that he's got going on, so he's got some power levels going on there, so I miss it, and then that set my second art read through, I saw, I'm like, oh, they're right there, that is cool. So again, this is a group that's going to push Bruce to the limit.
Yep.
But this Bruce isn't going to try to do it solo.
Nope.
This Bruce is going to call in the Bat family. He's got them all on speed dial now. It's not going to be, I'm going to deal with this myself. No, Bruce is going to reach out for backup. And I love the fact that, that's one of the things I really do want to see, this group coming in against this different form of Batman, against this different mindset that Bruce has.
Yeah, and that's something where, as Bruce gets older, we want to see, like, how is Bruce different? How is he, what has he learned? And what, that doesn't mean he's perfect. That's something that's interesting with Bruce Wayne and Batman, is a guy who's honed himself through his entire career, right? So you would think that, like, he's honed himself to a self-perfection. But he's also distanced himself from people. I love the fact that this storyline is showing how in today's Batman, we're seeing a Batman who is, like, maybe regretting some of his relationship choices with the Bat family, trying to build bridges, trying to be, I guess, internally thinking about himself. We all do that, right? Where we learn something more, we become something new, I think about you in particular, and I'm sure you probably do the same with me. Think about 17 years ago when we started all this, right? You and I are not the same two people that we were when we started this podcast. Even in our relationship, right? I mean, you and I were friends when we started this show. But we were friends because we hung out and watched wrestling together. And we were like, hey, let's do a podcast, right?
Yep.
You weren't a comic book reader at the time, but then jumped into this. But now we're both active comic book readers. We're different comic book readers. One of the things I enjoy about doing this show is, like, seeing comics through a lens of, how does Jim see it? What is Jim seeing about these characters? What is Jim connecting to? I love that the characters are having that same kind of evolution along the way. Because I think every listener to this podcast is also having that same evolution, right? Well, if there are people that have listened to this thing all the way through, or if there are people that are just jumping on today, you had an evolution with these characters along the way that is something that's really, really interesting. This villain group is, to your point, with what we're seeing with the gradual, like the shadowed figures and what that looks like. I love that this book has a supernatural level of creepy. We flip the page and we're seeing Bruce Wayne having, in his dreams at least, this bat creature spouting out of him.
Yep.
I remember book on record sets as a kid where we're seeing some supernatural, not to this level, but some supernatural Batman creep that was Detective Comics oriented. I don't know what's going on here with Barbados, but Barbados links back to, what was the Scott Snyder series? Why am I drawing a blank on it right now? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, God, yeah. And I'm drawing a blank right along with you, dude.
But the two different Scott Snyder series that we were seeing where they were basically big DC crossovers. And Barbados was one of the characters, right?
Yes.
Now we're seeing a variation on that where we're grabbing that concept that Scott Snyder introduced, but Ram V's like, hey, let me play with this a little bit. Let me make it a little more now and current. Let's explore it a little bit more and see how it's affecting the Bruce Wayne's. When we all sleep, we think of things. We explore things that are in our subconscious. And what happens when you wake up and you're having reactions to that? And I loved the way that played out in this. Gorgeous artwork. We talked about this with David Barron's colors. Remember way back when? Now we're seeing another artist who is, instead of exploring like this 75 different color palette, we're going to stick to some ranges of reds, blacks, blues, add a little gray tones into them, add a little darker tones into them, but we're going to explore those tones. Beautiful. Beautiful execution in this. Then you flip to Bruce waking up and discovering that this doggone box is a music box. I loved that. The pacing of this is fantastic. And the fact that there's so much going on that makes me anticipate finding out more and discovering Detective Comics, right? Discovery. Discovering more in the next issue. This is a well thought out, well planned introduction to a new creative team. I want to see more of what they're doing with Detective Comics. And that's pivotal in the first issue. Defining your run as something a little bit unique, a little bit different. Am I right? This is hard to do with Batman. Because think about throughout the history of this character, going all the way back to the very beginning, what talent has touched this book.
Yes.
Yet this feels so different than anything I've ever read before. Kudos. Okay. I don't know how you do that. They did it.
It's one of those things, how do you follow? Like, you know, you drop, mic drop, follow back. He picked it up, said, okay, you got it. And he did. He's continuing on some epic stories going on here. And again, art team, I'm so glad you brought up the fact of that heavy red palette where Bruce's body is not in the red. And it's like, you've got that natural looking to him with the supernatural surrounding him. You know, and I love the thinking because this is the sequence that actually got me thinking maybe something is really wrong with Bruce. You know, because you think he's always said in the past he only dreams when he needs to, not like, you know, you and I. You know, so this is maybe his body telling him there's something else going on here. There's something else influencing you. Now, it could be his subconscious and his personal fears creating it, or it could actually be an attack on his body. It could be, you know, Barbados is back. I don't know. And by the way, Dark Knight's Metal is the story that Snyder did with him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I was like kicking myself, like, why am I not remembering this right now? But
yeah, well, I did a search.
Yeah, but I love
talking because I'm like, it's killing me. It was driving me nuts. I had to do because I was drawing a blank too.
Are you reading? By the way, let's pull aside and do a little side right now. Are you reading any of the Comixology Scott Snyder series?
Which ones?
I mean, there's so many of them right now. Scott Snyder's doing these like Comixology originals.
Yeah, I've picked up a couple of them. So
terrific what's being done there. And I just want to shout out Scott Snyder in general. What I love about this is Ram V's like, let me take some of that Scott Snyder laid out on the table. Let's explore that. And I think people have done this over the years with Grant Morrison, with Scott Snyder, Jeff Johns, your top talent, right? Going all the way back to the beginning. And I'm going to underrepresent them. I love when a writer says, this is a cool idea. Let me play with it a bit. I love when writers lay out toys. And Grant Morrison talked about this a lot over the years, about how his intention was to lay out this kind of concepts for the purpose of future writers to take them and explore them and expand them. He did that, during the eras, think about when Grant Morrison was like an architect at DC. I'm not diminishing Grant Morrison's role now, but think about, we had that era where we had Grant Morrison was like guiding the ship, Final Crisis era, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He was laying out some really heady concepts that today we're still seeing. Scott Snyder did the same thing, and we're seeing that play out right now. Super, super cool. And
big time.
That was something that I absolutely adored. I would be remiss in this issue if I didn't talk about the backup stories. And you and I really had this like cool era when we first started this podcast where there weren't backup stories, remember?
Yeah.
We didn't get any of this stuff. Now we're getting it regularly. And these co-features, I don't care which one's the front story, the back story. So Jim Gordon in the Coda, part 1 of 3. Let's shout out the creative team. Simon Spurrier's the writer. Danny's the artist. Dave Stewart is the colorist. Steve Wan's on letters. Ariana Turturro and Jessica Chen, editors. What I love about this is you've got this terrific detective story with Batman. You could have ended the book there. As a reader, I'm satisfied. But wait, there's more. Jim Gordon, we're going to continue exploring this character in a way that honors what just happened in Joker.
Yep.
But yet feels different and unique and is going to pull you through. This is part 1 of 3. Artistically, storyline-wise, I feel like this is artsy. Very different. I love the use of like dialogue balloons, dialogue panels that are just dialogue, where we're getting into Jim's head, getting to know Jim more, getting to know a Jim who's like trying to find his way in the Gotham world. Where does he fit into all of this? Beautiful artwork, gritty, realistic, something that doesn't work in every book, but is designed for this particular book.
Yeah,
editorially, creatively, anyone who made decisions about this, they're nailing this book. I loved everything about the Ram V detective story. You would have had me month after month for just that alone. This feels like eye candy.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because a lot of times with the backup story and all that, I kind of like a splash of different art style, the changeover, and I kind of like that. With this one, it fits so well the story being told. Because again, it's the story being told, the words, the script, the layout, all that stuff is one thing. But then you've got this art style fitting it and fitting the primary story as well. It kind of blended nicely, and I kind of like the fact that they didn't go with a dramatically different art style for this book. For this backup story, it needed to have this kind of style to this groove, and it, again, continuing on where it's going from after the Joker story, I do like seeing Gordon. I always want Gordon to be out on top and be, stronger and larger than life. Here he's a little bit beaten down, but Gordon's down, but he's not out. It's a rally time, it's recovery time, it's comeback time. And I'm looking forward to seeing Gordon, actually through this case, actually get back to that groove of who he is and what he's about. Because you think back to the ending of Joker War, he's like, hey, I'm not ready to go back there. I don't have that same fire that you and my daughter have, but I'm going to get it. Maybe one day I'll get it back. I see this being the story that helps him get back that fire that he had as Jim Gordon, as the commissioner.
Yep. And there's a sense of progression for that character. And we follow serialized media month after month because we want to see these characters grow and change, and we want to see how events impact them, right? The Joker's story impacted him. Everything that's happened in Gotham has impacted him. He's a character now. We've all hit this point in time in our life. You and I both have, right? At different times. And we've been support for each other in those sequences where what is our purpose? What is our goal? What do we want out of life? What do we want our job to be? What do we want relationships to be? Friendships to be? Relationships with family to be? Jim Gordon's experiencing all of that right now.
Yeah.
And also, when there's roadblocks in the way, how do you find your way back? How do you combat them? Jim Gordon feels so three-dimensional in this. And I loved that. I'm like, but wait, there is more.
Yeah.
And the art style is going to be one where, I'm going to be honest, it's not normally an art style that I choose, but wow, absolute perfection for this. Gritty, little stylistic, a very different take of Jim Gordon on this. And I mean, you know, it's a flavor, if that makes any sense, that fits this story. And kudos to the art team for saying, we're going to play around with this a bit and give you a different sort of take on this than what you would normally see. And that's something that I really, really liked in this because I read a lot of comics. And to wake me up and go, all right, what are they doing here?
Yeah.
And it's very atmospheric. I guess that's really what I'm going for. And I think the choice to say we are going to, not just through dialogue, but through because the dialogue is huge in this, right?
Yeah.
But the art actually matches that, where they're like, okay, you're going to do this dialogue piece? Well, on the panels where we're taking over, we're going to tell you equally as good a story. This is an example of an art team understanding the writing in the story in a way that really accentuates each other. This is something you could only do in comics, right? Yeah. Where else can you get away with this? And do it in such a way where as readers we're like, I'm not so sure about this in the first couple pages. You know what? Page 3, how could you do it differently?
Yeah.
This is like there's a comfort level, and that was what it was like for me. Page 3, I'm like, how else would you do this story? Page 1 and 2, I'm like, do I even like this? That is the magic of comics, right? Where they're like, we're going to play around with this and turn it on the head and make you question things. Then by page 3, you're going to be like, this is what this Jim Gordon story needs to be through all 3 chapters of this. Please give me more of this. I'm begging for it now. For me, it was page 3. Page 3, I was like, oh, I get what they're doing here. I didn't know I wanted this, but man, do I want it now.
I'll tell you, when I did my art read through on this section, I really loved it because one of the things that I really can appreciate in art, when just looking at the images, you can tell the story.
Yes.
You know, and that's something that sometimes there's some books where you do need to read the words to truly understand it. But this one, just looking at the pictures, you can see and you know what's going on. And what's going on with the story, and it fits so well, you know. And this Gordon is a different look than what I like my Jim Gordon to be larger than life, to be that guy who keeps up with the bat. You know, that's Gordon to me. I can see this guy has been beaten up through the Joker, but the Gordon we know is coming back.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, because especially there was that one scene when he's in Arkham before, you know, he finds Sorrow, Jonas, whoever that the kid is that's there, you know, he has that moment when he's clearing holster and he's like, hey, identify. He's just about to say, identify yourself, and bam, gets knocked to the ground and he's scrambling. And, you're like, okay, he's got a little bit of work, but he's popping up. And I want to see next issue, seeing how he has, this conversation with this kid who's right there in the heart of Arkham right now. And is this Jonas? Is this somebody else? Is Jonas somewhere else? I don't know, but I want to know. I want to know who the kid is. I want to know what's going on with Gordon. I want to see the next issue. This 100% has me pulled in a couple pages. I'm like, yes, I want more of this, please.
Yeah, and that was the perfect place to end this, with the nugget of who is this Sorrow? What is this creature? What is this person? Male, female, what is this entity? I don't know at the end. I want to read next issue. And that was something that was really important. It was the right length of a story, right? And boy, it's funny the amount of noise that is not happening in comics right now. What I say that as a fan of the artistic medium, I know I'd love to see more people acknowledging the fact that they're doing some really crazy stuff. And this is the place to go for Netflix-level storytelling, and there's no other way to put it. We talk about binge-watching television. Binge-watching comics right now should be binge-reading comics right now should be a cool thing, because there are people really playing around with the medium and really having a lot of fun with it. And this is why comics need to be protected. Books like this. I love that after all the years I've read Detective Comics, I'm reading now new creative teams in both the foreground and the background story, whatever you want to call these two stories that happen here. I don't want to diminish either of them, because the fact that there are creative teams that are like, hey, we're here, look at us, we're making noise with characters that you think you knew everything about. We're going to shake off things and tell you about this is who these characters are today. And everything you've read before has impacted them. This is why you care. You can jump on now as a first-time reader. You've been reading a long time. We're going to tell you something new as well. Slap you in the face with it. That's what I love about comics. This is super cool. This is why you and I keep podcasting. We don't have to do this. We don't... Big secret out there? We don't make money at this. Jim and I do this because it's fun, and we love connecting with all of you. But more importantly, we love connecting with each other in this. It's stories like this that make me glad I'm still doing this podcast, because I love to highlight stuff like this. This is yay to these creative teams, and thank you so much for delivering this kind of content. This is why I'm still here. This is why I still read.
Yes.
Can Batman escape? One hint, the worst is yet to come.
RagingBullets.com is our show website. I'd like to remind everyone about that. That's the place you will find the news and first releases. It does go into Twitter and our Facebook fan page. 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype is our show voicemail line. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address. You prefer to contact us that way. The About Us section of our show website has the way you can connect us on social media and gaming platforms. We love to connect with all of you. We have an amazing Facebook group community, and there's two Facebook group communities out there. One is the older one, which has like 700 and something people that have connected to it. Facebook shut that down, and we started up a new one. There's over 192 participants of our regular Facebook group. That is where we pull from for Speeding Bullets. If you want to participate in that group and see all the news that's being thrown out there by our crack team, they are a part of the podcast. No two ways about it. Jim and I do the regular show. We have an amazing group of people that are kind enough every week to throw out the latest and greatest of the DC news, things they want us to be chit-chatting about or shouting out to our community. Thank you so much to everyone who participates there, because I don't know what we'd do without you. Thank you for curating the best of the news that's on the internet about DC Comics. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Dark Crisis, the Deadly Green one-shot. 40% off, only $3.59. And Dark Crisis, Worlds Without a Justice League Green Arrow special, 40% off only $2.99. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, they have the Robin and Batman hardcover, $24.99, regularly 50% off, only $12.49. The Swamp Thing trade paperback, Volume 2 Conduit, $16.99, regularly 50% off, only $8.49. Wonder Woman Black and Gold hardcover, $39.99 regularly, 50% off, only $19.99. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, not only for supporting our podcast, but for those of you out there that listen to multiple podcasts, you'll hear they support a lot of podcasts, and we really appreciate that support. Mr. Segulin, next week we're going to be talking about more comics, and we're going to talk about DC Mech. And, of course, we're going to also talk about Batman One Bad Day, Riddler #1, that one-shot series. We will see you next week.
Bye!
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Raging Bullets time is here. We talk about what we hold dear. Comic books and TV shows. Superheroes and their clothes. Justice League and so much more. I just love Green Lantern Corps. We talk about the books we've read with spoilers straight ahead.
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it. What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that.
I think
Sean,
it's right
Jim,
there. I don't know.
how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's on